Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today's the first down day we've seen in the market in probably about a week or so, and so I wanted to take a look a little bit further into it and try and see if we can figure out, like, is this just kind of a little bit of a dip and a healthy recovery from a lot of the up only type of momentum that we've seen lately, or is this part of a potentially larger pullback that we should be not necessarily concerned about, but at least just aware of, so we don't get caught by it. So let's go ahead and dive right in. As I talked about in the beginning of the video, we can see that this is an overall down day. Everything, or I guess I would say the majority of things, are red. We have a couple. Hex is kind of the only one that's up pretty big. XRP is up a decent amount as well, which is good. But otherwise, we're seeing a lot of stuff and looking red right now, which, again, like I said, I don't know how much of a concern this is, primarily just because we've seen a lot of up over the past week or two. If we do look at the week chart, we can see it's still very, very strong green. So not a whole lot to be concerned about, at least in my mind. What I did want to talk about, though, today is this going to be part of a larger pullback? And so what we're looking to do here is kind of figure out and get some metrics on if so, why, how, when, a lot of that type of stuff. So the thing I want to look at next is the Crypto Fear and Greed Index. And as we can see, we have actually popped up into greed. We have not seen this, basically, I would say, since like the end of July. So, almost 2 months that we haven't seen any sort of like greed action going on. We can also see that when we popped into greed, it was when Bitcoin hit similar prices. We're actually a little bit higher than what we were at this point in time. Not too much, I guess, but what we did see at this point in time is we did kind of see a little bit of a top out, and then we obviously saw that like months long pullback. And so this kind of leads to the question of, is this happening, or is something like this happening? And that is kind of the main question that we need to figure out. So there's a couple different things I wanted to look at, but before we go into that, I wanted to take a look at the chart because we can see a couple of different things going on here. So what we can see is, actually, let's move out to the daily, because I think this will give us a better picture of what we're seeing. So looking at the daily, we can see a couple of pretty important things. So the first one that we saw that was pretty important is we did break out of this kind of upward channel, and then we actually did hit the top of this descending channel that we have been seeing, forming basically ever since the beginning of March. So we hit that. Obviously, you can see we saw a wick up there. We do see a wick right here, and then now we're currently at a red candle. Obviously, this candle has not closed yet, so this could continue to flip back to green. But at least thus far, it does look like we've seen a pretty decent rejection up at this point at the top of this channel. Now, of course, who's to say exactly where this is going to go? I mean, we could come back, test the top of this channel, bounce off, come back up, break through the top of this channel, and continue on our way. Or we could continue sitting in this channel like we have been for the past 6 months or so at this point. And kind of as I've mentioned on the channel before, I do kind of have this bias that I do think we will come all the way back down to the bottom of this channel, bounce off the bottom of this channel, which currently at this point is within this liquidity zone. We can tell that this is a very large liquidity zone because we've seen a lot of wicks down. Also, we did see a lot of action in here before we took our next move up to the upside way back in February. So I do have a little bit of a bias that I do think something like this is going to happen. However, like I'm not married to the fact that this could happen, or I'm like not certain that it's going to happen, right? I do think it's a possibility and potentially a strong possibility that this happens, but I would by no means say that like I'm willing to like bet my bags on it. So that's something where you can see I actually took a short right up here. Obviously so far it's in profit right now. I will probably, as we get closer to the top end of this trend line, maybe look to cut a little bit, and then obviously if it bounces, then that's fine, but if not, it could continue down through all the way to the bottom of this channel. This is a 100x leverage play, I believe. If we look, it's actually 90x leverage. See, it's about 54% right now. But if this were to move all the way to the bottom of this channel, this would be a definitely very, very substantial play. So I'll probably cut, maybe half of it or so right here, where it's probably kind of the safest to do so. And then I might just leave the other half to run and see kind of if we can make it back down to this level. Again, it's hard to say for certain what's going to happen, but ultimately that's kind of what I'm thinking. As you can see, I am trading on Margex just because it is a good place to do some leverage trading, if you ask me. As I mention all the time, leverage trading is not without its risks. It's very, very risky, but also you can make a decent bit of money if you do know what you're doing. As we can see, we are up just over 50% on this one. And then I've had a couple historicals that have done pretty well. This one obviously being the best at just shy of 300%. We had this one, at 57, and then this one also at, 72. So, not too bad overall. As you can see, I have lately almost exclusively been playing Bitcoin. I've tried to trade Jasmine before. I've tried to trade ICP. I've had relative success on both of them, but Bitcoin, I think I tend to track their chart a little bit closer, and so I just happen to do better on Bitcoin specifically. But overall, whatever makes you comfortable. If you are interested, please check out the link in my description below. There is no KYC or VPN required, so if that's something that you're interested in, it's really, really nice because you essentially just get signed up and started to trade. So, but again, I will remind you, it is not without risks. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, just make sure that you're being careful and you're being responsible about it. So moving on, the next thing that I wanted to look at is kind of doing a larger overview of kind of where we're at in the market. And as we can see with the heat map, we are still sitting in strong. We are towards the lower end of strong, which is good. We had several that were, moving into overbought that have kind of started to pull back, which is nice. What we can see is we are starting to see kind of a move back into neutral, which is good. Obviously we've started to see a little bit of pullback in the wider market. I do think this is good if we can kind of hold price relatively stable and not pull too far back, but kind of come back within this, lower neutral, I would say would probably be ideal before we continue our next leg up. I think that would be kind of a relatively healthy sign for the market. If we look at kind of some larger time frames, we can see we are sitting in neutral on the weekly, which is good. We have a couple that have started to move into strong. And then if we look at 12-hour, we're seeing a lot more moving out of overbought and back into strong, which is a good thing, and also more moving into neutral. 4-hour is going to be the same type of thing. We've actually moved primarily back into neutral, which is good. Obviously, there are more within strong and overbought than oversold and weak. But the majority being within neutral means that the market is starting to kind of come back and recover a little bit, which is a good thing. The next thing that we want to look at here is the visual screener. And the visual screener is really helpful because it gives you kind of a sense on what the market's doing generally, using each coin as kind of like a data point. And so what we can see here is, at least on the 24-hour time frame, people are mainly closing longs and entering shorts. So this means a couple things, right? Obviously, the market has kind of moved up. People are getting a little bit worried that the prices are stalling a little bit. And so people are starting to either close out their longs and then possibly even enter shorts for some. Usually the market is wrong. So, whether obviously we have seen a little bit of a pullback, but whether this pullback actually becomes sustained is something that it remains to be seen a little bit, right? Now, the liquidation map shows something slightly contradictory to what the visual screener is showing. Not on the 1 day, but if we look at the 7 and 30 day, we'll see that. And so what we can see here is it is actually very, very slightly biased towards liquidating shorts, which would mean a move to the upside. However, what we can see here is most of the liquidation volume is within like $3,000 of either side. They're super, super tight, kind of within like, $1,500. That's kind of where the two major walls are, both to the up and downside. And then we have kind of a slider wall on both to kind of a little bit further out from that. And so this is indicating that potentially we see a further move up, but usually when it's this level, I don't consider it a strong like magnet towards one direction or the other. Looking at the 7 day, we can see that we are still definitely very slanted towards liquidating longs, which would indicate a move to the downside. 30 days also going to look somewhat similar, actually even more slanted, with about just shy of $10 billion. When we looked at this last, it was actually over 10 billion. So it does mean that people are maybe starting to close some of their long trades potentially. But ultimately, based on liquidations, it's very clear which direction that this market is going to move. However, we have started to see some of that reaction within the visual screener. So there's conflicting data right now. I do think a pullback is probably fairly likely to happen. How long that pullback sustains itself, it's hard to say, right? But hopefully this information was useful. Given where we're at in the market, I do think, there's a lot of indecision still. We obviously have seen a pretty big run up in the market. And so people are trying to figure out like, is this real? Is it a fake out? Like what's going on? And so where we're at currently, I think is pretty healthy. Like I showed on the chart, we are kind of sitting at the top end of that channel. I think naturally we're going to run into a ton of resistance at the top of that channel just because we have been sitting in it for so long. Now, whether we, kind of consolidate on that level and then eventually break through, I think that's kind of the most likely and hopefully bullish thing to happen. But as I've mentioned, like, it is very possible that we could see one more move to the downside, you know, kind of catch that liquidity zone at the very bottom of that channel, which would be around 52, 52 and a half, and then continue our run up from there. Whether that happens, I think also depends a lot on what type of cycle we'll see. If we're going to see a cycle kind of topping out late 2024, early 2025, I don't think there's time to kind of do that, you know, run down and then run back up. I think things would have to like teleport down and teleport back kind of reasonably quickly for something like that to happen. So I think if that doesn't happen, then it means we're probably going to have a much earlier cycle. If we start to see a rejection and move back down to that bottom end, I think that would indicate that we may have a later cycle, maybe peaking mid to late 2025. I do think those are both, you know, still relatively likely options. And so, you know, kind of which one wins out is definitely hard to say, but I do think what happens here very shortly on the Bitcoin chart may actually provide some pretty good insight into that. So hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really, really does help me out grow the channel. And I also am trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And so your help with that, is very, very helpful. And I do really appreciate it. Also, if you have any comments, concerns, questions, feedback, anything like that that you want to mention, please just do drop it in my comment section. I do try and read and respond to all of my comments. So, you know, if you have anything that you want me to see or you want my opinion on, or also just have any like feedback or potential things that I might be missing within the market, I would really appreciate hearing that as well, because I do get a lot of really helpful and insightful comments from my community and from people watching the channel. And so, you know, if you have anything like that, I would really appreciate seeing that. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.